Three, Bob.
Hello, and welcome to the Tifo Football Podcast. I'm Joe Devine, and today I was delighted to be joined by Ben Green, aka Producer Ben, from such podcasts as the Totally Football Show, and of course the Guardian Football Weekly in a previous life. I'm going to read from Ben Green's Wikipedia page now. Ben Green is a British media and podcast producer, currently head of production for Muddy Knees Media. Green is commonly referred to as Producer Ben on air. It is longer than that, his Wikipedia page, but, I feel like I'm going to sell it better if I tell you myself that we talked about his time at Channel 4 News, LBC Radio, of course, Football Weekly, all the stuff, working with James Richardson and moving on to Muddy Knees and the Totally Football Show. We also talk about wrestling at the beginning because Ben loves wrestling and lots of other things, long old chat. It was really fun, actually. Producer Ben is a man who many of you may have heard snippets of on various popular football podcasts. But have you ever got underneath the skin of Producer Ben? No? That's good, because I did today. And you can join me as we crawl through his organs, and I don't know, through the esophagi. If you like this podcast, you can also listen to the Totally Football Show. That's free for subscribers and non-subscribers of The Athletic. But if you'd like to listen to that show or this show totally ad-free, you can do so by becoming a subscriber of The Athletic. You can get a 30-day free trial to try that out. And of course, all of the best sports writing available online for 10 sports or 11. And you can do that by visiting theathletic.com/Tifo. That's theathletic.com/Tifo. A 30-day free trial. Try it before you buy. I'm sure you're going to love it. Anyway, that's all for me at the beginning here. More of me now after the music plays. But lots more of Ben Green, a.k.a. Producer Ben. Executive Producer Ben, hello, welcome to the Tifo Football Podcast.
Hello, Executive Producer Joe. An absolute pleasure to be here, and I'm sorry that you've had to scrape the barrel.
Don't say that, because if you say I'm scraping the barrel, then it's a suggestion that I'm at the bottom of the barrel also, because we share a job title. But anyway, I've introduced you already. The first thing I would like to say about you, though, is that you claim to be on first-name terms with Triple H of wrestling fame. Do explain that, please.
My friend Paul. This goes back to, I think, January 2016. It might be 2017. The dates are a little cagey, and maybe I'll just Google as we talk here and recount the story. But I was at the Guardian at the time, and I was and I'd got back into wrestling in a big way. It's never really gone away, but it sort of dominated my my spare time there, particularly the older stuff and the behind the scenes stuff. And in my desire to to watch quite a lot of it, I asked the Guardian if I could go to the WWE's 3-day tournament in Blackpool in January, which was around the time of my birthday as well.
Could I stop you and say, for listeners who are international, will you describe Blackpool and its sort of position within the UK?
Well, I can say this because my mum is from Manchester, the northwest of England. Mm-hmm. It's pretty, well, in January it's pretty grim. It's a seaside town.
Sure.
It's but I believe it might be the suicide capital of the UK. It's certainly got the highest rate of prescription medication. Very nice in the summer, probably, and particularly in the 60s.
Lovely.
Where your families would go on their holidays to a bit of the pier.
The Big Dipper, of course.
The Big Dipper, the seaside. Stay in a nice hotel.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. Now,
the ballroom dancing, of course, also is what Blackpool is known for.
Well, we'll get onto the Emperor's Ballroom soon, but now it's sort of like stag party-tastic. The Labour Party have taken away their national convention from there, so that's seen a big hit in jobs, as the owner of a curry house that I went to was telling me when I was the only person in there.
Right.
It was It was very bleak and cold in January, but
An
as I
odd
said,
place to stage a WWE event.
yes. Well, Blackpool's got quite a history in British wrestling, in the same way that Butlins and sort of these holiday venues. A lot of people would ply their trade on the pier in front of live audiences. People like William Regal, who you might have known as Stephen Regal. Wrestler, and his real name is Darren, and I met him at the same
Three incredibly boring first names, I have to say.
He's in charge of sort of finding new talent across the globe and knows everybody. So, and because he's from Blackpool, I imagine, suggested, let's do this tournament in Blackpool. And so I kind of got in with the press office at WWE, and I had 3 nights there, and journalistically, I made a film for The Guardian, which you can still see if you look for WWE The Guardian, because they don't have a great deal of stuff there. But it's good. And I interviewed Triple H, and actually, I haven't seen him since, but the guy who is sort of head of press at WWE says that the interview that we did, he sort of used on media training courses and things, because I asked him tough questions, Guardian lefty liberal questions about, resolution through violence, and should I be utterly ashamed of myself for enjoying this and letting my children watch it. I know, it was really good fun.
Yeah.
My mate Paul.
Do you think if you saw Paul, aka Triple H, again, he would remember you?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Almost certainly. Well, anyway, I just wanted to get the headline anecdote out of the way. Let's go back now, because that's clearly the most impressive thing you've ever done. Let's go back now and start at the beginning of your life, Paul. Where were you born? Paul, Ben. Sorry, I'm getting Triple H's in my head.
Yeah. No, I'm Ben. I was born in northwest London in a place called Hampstead Garden Suburb, which, if you don't know northwest London at all, you won't know. And I'll just say, from a tube map perspective, it's between Hampstead and Golders Green on the Northern Line.
Lovely spot. And you're famous for working at The Guardian, primarily as as producer Ben on the Football Weekly show, and then subsequently as part of Muddy Knees Media as producer Ben, and now executive producer Ben at The Athletic. But I want to study the journey, Ben. That's what we're really here to do. How does a man end up at The Guardian? Because there's a lot of them there, but I don't know how anyone gets there.
Wow. Okay. So I'll start with sort of the basics here. That my mum was a journalist, and occasionally still is. She writes as Sue Fox for the Sunday Times magazine, does the Life in the Day column occasionally, and has sort of been perpetually saying, "This is my last article," which she's been doing for about 20 years.
What's a Sue Fox?
Sorry?
What's a Sue Fox?
What's a Sue Fox? That's what she writes at. Her name is Susan.
Oh, I see. Sorry, I thought you described it as if it was like an agony aunt or something. I thought it was a special term for journalism, a piece of journalism that I didn't understand.
No.
Her name is Sue Fox. That's how she writes.
Fox,
right?
From Manchester. And well, if you want something interesting about her family life, her grandparents, the surnames were Wolf and Fox.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Wild things.
Yeah, and Eastern European Jews, they changed their name to Fox when they came into Manchester Piccadilly Station and saw an advert for Fox's Glacier Mints.
Nice. Okay.
So there you go.
Some of the most delicious hard sweets.
Yes. But we digress, Joe, and I feel we're leading people on the wrong path there. But yeah, my mum was a journalist, so I was always very interested in becoming a journalist, and she did features and stuff. So I've never wanted to do sort of news or anything worthy, I should say.
Serious.
Serious stuff. And I always thought I could write. I was confident in my ability to write, but I really, really liked listening to storybooks when I was younger. To go to sleep, and then I sort of graduated to listening to radio. So radio audio's always been a big companion of mine, and speech stuff. So I thought, kind of by the time I went to university, I'm going to give this radio thing a lot. So I did student radio, and I was at Birmingham. I was doing a degree in American Studies. I was writing at the same time. was doing restaurant reviews and comedy reviews and stuff. I had a year in America at Santa Cruz, which, if you've seen The Lost Boys, you'll know as the most haunted city in America, or town in America. Very cool, weird place. But I did some more radio there. And then after I did my degree at Birmingham, I did a postgrad course at City University in broadcast journalism, where I sort of learnt more of the sort of techniques and, used Cool Edit as it was then. That's now Audition, kids, yeah. I used that for the first time, and I got sponsored through that course by LBC. This was at a time when LBC and commercial radio were, can I say spunking?
Yeah, you absolutely can.
I'll quickly clarify it. Yeah, where they were spunking lots and lots of money on things like Paul Daniels reviewing the papers for £250 for like 10 minutes. They were owned by, they were bought by Chrysalis, who have several bits of business. But yeah, Chrysalis were spending quite a lot of money and, doing something very worthy, aside from, Paul Daniels and Esther Ranson and Boy George being involved with the station. They were giving some, the next generation of radio talent an opportunity to work there. So they gave away two internships, one, and they were both intended as newsroom positions. But I said in my interview that I don't want to do that. I want to do comedy and culture and all that kind of stuff. So I kind of caused a bit of a problem. The other guy that got the position still works there. He's now the managing editor. It's called Tom Cheel. But I was...
What you could have been, eh?
And so he's been there. He's been political correspondent. He's been in the newsrooms and everything. Very nice guy. But like I said, I was a bit of a problem because I wanted to be a producer, and I wanted to work with Sandy Toksvig above anything else. And I did work on her show for a little bit, and I also worked with Henry Kelly. Remember him?
I don't know Henry Kelly. No, yeah.
Going for Gold. No.
No.
All right.
Who was Henry Kelly?
Henry Kelly was a slightly naff TV presenter from the sort of late 80s, early 90s.
Right.
But a very serious journalist before he was that. He used to host the Classic FM breakfast show, probably BBC London as well. But yeah, he was at LBC, and we shared a hairdresser. And although I'd already got this internship...
That's where the business gets done, isn't it?
Although I'd already got this internship thing, and which was, they paid for my fees at City, and I got a job with them at the end, and I worked there during the course. I said to Henry, who has terrible hair, by the way, if you look up it, but we were going to the same hairdresser under the bridge at Golders Green station, and I said, "You can go in front of me, Henry, if you give me someone good to call at LBC." And he did, and I never called this person. And then when I went into LBC, I saw him there, and he therefore sort of thinks that that I owed my career to him. He was a lovely guy. My dad is Irish as well, so Henry, being very Irish,
right,
took something of a shine to me. Met my dad, and he was at my wedding.
Oh, that's lovely.
Again, we digress. I wanted to be a producer. I got the opportunity to be a producer at LBC. I was there for about 3 years doing all sorts of shows, including the early breakfast show, where I spent a year waking up at about 10 to 3 to be in work at 3:30, 4:45, and it's kind of messed up my sleep pattern ever since and made me very tired and emotional. I would cry at adverts. That's my overwhelming memories. If we can bring this back to football,
please do.
The Champions League final in 2005 when I was working at LBC, I was so tired. And this was when Liverpool 3-0 down, of course, then come back to make it 3-3, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I just absolutely bawled my eyes out because I was so exhausted, and it was a very emotional game.
It was very emotional anyway, wasn't it? I would say that well-rested people were in tears that night.
Yes, and I had to wake up at whatever o'clock the next day.
Can I take you back a little bit and latch on to your year in America? Because I'm very curious to know what you were doing on the radio in America.
We can go back and latch onto that. So long as then we can then fill in the gaps, and then how I get to the Guardian. And then
I want to come again. I just think I'm an ADB guy. You know what I'm saying?
All right, you're non-linear. It's all content.
Yeah, it really is all content. But do tell me, what were you doing on the radio in America? Because it seems like a strange place for a young Englishman.
Oh well, it was the university station. So it's not like I was broadcasting to vast swathes of people on WDNYX,
right? Sure,
whatever.
But what does one do on student radio? Because I've never done it.
Well, in Birmingham, I did. They had a station called Burn FM, Birmingham University Radio Network, and I did what's called Breakfast in Bed with Ben and Matt, or Matt and Ben, my pal Matt. Then we just played some music and talked about stuff for a couple of hours.
What kind of stuff would you talk about?
Oh God, I've got it on cassette somewhere.
Maybe
even on mini disc, but I haven't heard it for many times. We certainly didn't talk about the burning issues in life. Matt had long hair. We might have talked about that. We might have talked about. Joe, I don't know what we talked about. I can remember some of the music we played.
Like, give us some examples of the music you were playing.
Are you aware of Cat Power?
Sure. Yeah.
We played He War by Cat Power. I think that was our first song. I really liked that. And I'm sure I did some sort of intro into that where in fact, we would have come off a conversation about cats. Right. I'm a big cat fan.
Okay, yeah.
And went into Cat Power.
Did you like to do the thing where you would still be talking as the music starts and fade that in and fade your voice out, or was it much more functional?
Oh no, never crashed the intro.
No, you're a purist. You leave yourself out of the song.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
We'd play some very fun stuff, and this is often this we did after the year in America, so that we'd played quite a lot of country music as well.
Right.
All My Exes Live in Texas by George Strait. Might have played some naughty music as well. Might have played Hose in Different Area Codes by Ludacris.
I forgot about Ludacris. Okay, listen. let's abandon student radio. It's 2005. You're crying. The Miracle of Istanbul. What happens after that? You're at LBC. How do you? Is there somewhere between that and the Guardian? Channel 4, right?
I think there's about another 6 to 9 months there, Joe, where I was still at LBC. I was freelancing at this point and sort of dabbling a little bit in publicity for children's books as well, doing some PR there with a friend of my sister who was a children's author, and I quite fancied. I still haven't done it. You'll see there's a book on my bookshelf down there, which is How to Write for Kids, which I don't think I've ever opened or read, but I have been waiting for a long time now to drop my award-winning story of the adventures of a fat cat.
Right.
But I found that the market has always been saturated by that.
Is it a communist fable, or is it just a fat cat?
No, it's a real fat cat.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so and whilst I was freelancing for doing this children's book PR, I was also doing some work for Channel 4.
Yeah.
Who were very keen to set up this alternative network to the BBC, sort of like a commercial radio answer to BBC's dominance of speech radio. So they'd have some music stations as well, but primarily they wanted to sort of be an alternative to Radio 4 and the Today programme, and I imagine 5 Live as well. They hired some really good people. They hired a guy called Bob Shannon, who was head of 5 Live at the time, to head them up, and he's now head of Radio 2 and Radio 6. I think he's head of all music radio at the B, but he's a big radio cheese.
Yeah.
But yeah, so they were very serious about doing this, and their whole plan was to build sort of the infrastructure you needed to get have the DAB masts and the like. So that was very expensive, and that was kind of going on in the background. But yeah, I was part of the launch team for the, what was it called? The Channel 4 News Morning Report podcast.
Right.
Which was a not particularly good version of a show, which I brought in with, I was there to sort of give it a bit of character, along with the other people who were on there who had more news chops than me. But I sort of had I could apply some fun and some program making experience to it, whilst also having worked in the newsroom, which I had done in my latter time at LBC.
You could lighten up the morning, but keep things professional.
Exactly. And yeah, I worked on that for about 6 months. I had some terrible shifts on that in terms of time patterns. Wow.
Early mornings.
You could do the overnight shift, which was 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. You could do the early shift, which was 4 a.m. to 1 p.m. Or there was a setup shift as well, which was probably I can't remember, but better hours, but finished at like 10 p.m. or something. It was it was all bad and all teary again. But great experience. Not just because I got to meet Jon Snow, and part of the shift involved you worked on the lunchtime news program, so I was involved in the news meetings that would be for that lunchtime show, and also for 7 o'clock news. And Jon Snow's two favourite phrases, it turned out, for those meetings were, if an idea wasn't very good, that's a bucket of wank, or if it was a bit better than that, wankstream.
No. I find it so hard to imagine Jon Snow saying those things. He's such a nice old man.
He is a lovely, avuncular old chap, but yeah, he had a bit of a potty mouth on him. He said it all, there was no malice involved. It was just his kind of trademark at the time.
Bucket of wank seems like a young person's game. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. maybe I'm casting too friendly a light on the elderly in our community. But Jon Snow, bucket of wank, doesn't. I can't visualize it, but I believe you.
We'll move away from Jon Snow's bucket of wank. But,
sure.
But yeah, I was freelancing there for Channel 4 News, and they were kind of getting further and further away from the launch date that they'd originally put in, and I'd started listening to these things called podcasts on Guardian Unlimited. The original version of the Guardian's website. So they first of all hosted Ricky Gervais's podcast, and then in the summer of that year, it was the World Cup in, I want to say, Germany, 2006.
Yeah,
it was, and they had this thing called Football. I don't know. No, it was the World Cup Daily. That's it, or the World Cup Show, which was hosted by TV's James Richardson. This hilarious Irish fella called Barry Glendenning, Sean Ingle, and a couple of other people. And I thought, wow, this is fun. I want to get involved in it. So I emailed or phoned up someone there. His name was Neil McIntosh. McIntosh, you see, has a bit of provenance in my career. But yeah, I spoke to him, and he said, "Oh well, send your CV. We're going to advertise for 2 jobs here." Sent the CV over, and he called me back almost immediately, and I got a very good vibe from that.
A positive vibe.
A positive vibe, and sure enough, I got one of those 2 positions. So it's a producer position. So they were hiring their own producer teams there, and that is how I got to work at the Guardian.
Producer Ben was born in the form that many know him as.
Not so much. And I got to say, when I got there, I was on a 9-month contract, and I fully intended not to stay beyond 9 months. I was just gonna sort of get some experience, and work on what I was doing there, but with the intention of joining Channel 4 Channel 4 Radio,
Right.
when that started up. And this was partly because the Guardian it was massively chaotic when I joined there. They hired 2 people, and they only had 1 desk for us, and only 1 machine with Audition on it.
Right.
So we had to share it. And for about the first 4 months, so that was a bit problematic. And it was just, they didn't really know what they were doing, and I was thinking, it's not proper radio. It's not gonna do anything.
What's this thing called podcast?
What's this thing called podcasting? Yeah. And yet, Channel 4 Radio kept pushing back their launch date until I believe they scrapped it in possibly 2009.
Right.
Something like that. They said, we can't afford it. We've lost all this money. But something like a 2-year delay from when they started to actually say no. And I ended up staying at The Guardian for 11 years. but I mean, you're very kind to refer to me as producer Ben, and it's always slightly embarrassing doing that. But no, I didn't start to work on Football Weekly until about probably about that time, 2008-9.
Right.
I worked on originally the Science show, Science Weekly, which was great fun. Then I launched the Music Weekly, and that was my first time on air proper.
Right.
I assumed the persona of producer Ben, the self-appointed 87th most influential person in UK music. And then I worked on Media Talk, which was the Media Guardian podcast, and that was great because it meant that I got to network quite a lot and sort of know the industry, and that was great. I worked with someone called Matt Wells on that, who was the editor of Media Guardian at the time. He's now at CNN. Lovely fellow, very, very good guy. But yeah, it wasn't until sort of a wave of redundancies at the Guardian, and I sort of saw. It's not like I'm massively prescient or anything like that, but I sort of saw the way the wind was blowing and thought, if they do get rid of their podcasts, by this time they'd hired about 6 other producers and were doing lots and lots of stuff. Thought if they do get rid of their podcasts at any point, they'll keep hold of Football Weekly. Yeah. Because that's really successful and really big and really good. So I'm going to attach myself to that. And I should say, apart from anything else, I really loved that show. I thought it was brilliant. I thought, this is a show I'd love to be associated with, having produced and worked on so much rubbish in my career, things at LBC and mostly LBC that I'm not, I'm going to say it here, Steve Allen. I've always hated Steve Allen. I worked with him for a bit and he made my life very miserable. But yeah, and that was, and I did their sex show for a bit and some other nonsense there when I was sort of on shift and just doing this, that and the other. Some stuff I was very proud of, but a lot of just the functional shift stuff, not so much, as people are, when they're starting off with things. But it was great to be associated and to be working on something so high profile and so good. And my life changed forever when I started working Football Weekly.
Well, let's talk about Football Weekly because it's exceptionally popular as a podcast. What was it like behind the scenes? I mean, how much did you guys know that you had a good thing in the early days when you first started working on the show? I mean, you say it was already very successful, but were you aware at the time of how sort of big that would become and how big podcasting would become generally as an industry?
Definitely not. I mean, I knew it was popular because a lot of my friends listened to it, and we were all of a certain age. And James was someone that we watched on Football Italia growing up. But it just seemed like this. It was like this different voice and this different take on football. This was a time when Alan Shearer and kind of the Match of the Day lot were doing no research about anything. there weren't stats or anything. It was all very much, oh, he'll be disappointed with that. It was cliche-ridden football analysis, whereas we were doing something much funnier and also much more in depth. There was good analysis and there was good humour, and this was because they were smart people talking about football. And that, so I did feel like kind of part of I suppose I did feel like we were helping sort of change the tide of analysis in football, and people were expecting better stuff. Perhaps it was the World Cup in South Africa or it might have been what happened in 2008? 2008 is
the Euros is Spain.
Okay, so
right?
It's 2010.
Yeah.
At the World Cup that is South Africa.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes. Yeah, and I think the commentary team didn't know anything about the players they were talking about. They were laughing. They were talking about Tunisia or Morocco.
Yeah.
Well organised, hard to break down, but we don't really know about these people. And then I think as well, around the same time, Newcastle had signed Hatem Ben Arfa, who I think Shearer might have got his name wrong or something, or again, just said we don't know anything about him. When actually, if you had been following French football or whatever, you would know that this was a properly skillful player, and you'd know which was his better foot and if he's good at free kicks and dribbling and all that kind of stuff. And that was kind of a watershed. And, I'm not in any way going to say Football Weekly was solely responsible for that, but you also had The Ramble coming up there. You had, The Fiver on The Guardian in terms of written content, live blogs, all just this different voice.
Yeah.
That was out there.
It's fair to say there was a group of people that were leading the charge there, and maybe forcing over time the middle to move slightly, or at least forcing Match of the Day to hire researchers for their pundits.
Yes, I think so. I think that's fair.
If that's a thing they do, I actually don't know. I assume it is. What do you know? Does Alan Shearer, when he's on Match of the Day, does he have a researcher? Is he given notes, or is he just encouraged by what's happening elsewhere to do more research these days? I couldn't possibly
say, Joe. I don't want to shatter the illusion. No, that's really like lifting the curtain there on how these guys do stuff. No. But, just hanging out and working with people like Rafa Honigstein. James Horncastle was young and up and coming then. Who else did we have that were? Philippe Claire was along with us, Amy Lawrence, just some really, really smart, interesting people who have views on things beyond just football and who see football for more than just the game being played on the pitch. And, having written my dissertation on representations of Reaganite foreign and domestic policy in Rocky 1, 2, 3, and 4. That kind of really struck a chord with me.
Sure,
I really like sort of taking that sort of artsy, wanky approach to looking at things, looking at X through the prism of Y.
Sure,
if you will.
Yeah, and what were you saying the other day? In a sideways look at.
A sideways glance at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to know from you what happens, because I don't listen to football podcasts anymore because I'm too busy doing them all the time. But when I did, I listened to Football Weekly and I loved it. And I really want to know, as a bit of a fan, can you take me through a day of a recording? Like, where are you? Who's arriving? How does it all work? Are you chatting beforehand? What are the edit points? Because it's such a sharp show. I always like to think with James Richardson that he almost sounds edited, but I assume that's just how he does it. For example, any little details like that for me?
I mean, James is super smart and super funny, and I've worked with him for over a decade. I think I've I've been the voice in James's earphones for however long it is. I discovered sort of very early on that he and I have a very similar sense of humour. He's much quicker and much funnier, but he loves wordplay. He loves, the man is a genius. So sort of in the early days, I'll be honest, behind the scenes, I didn't have certainly as much of a role either through my own desire or need. I sort of left everyone to do their own thing. That is, I chat with James, let him know who was on, and we booked the show basically according to who was on shift. He had Barry plus 2 others. And I didn't do a great deal of research or anything there, but I was, I came from live radio background. I would, and the show sort of ticked over by itself in terms of the running. Or we'd do Sid on Spain, and we didn't do very many phoners, or we just kind of followed the results as was, and then and looking forward to the games at the weekend as well. And if you listen to those shows, there's not much production wizardry in anything. It's just edited nicely, and it's got stings and all of that stuff. But then, as I worked with James for longer and longer, and we sort of developed that producer-presenter relationship, we got more confident with each other, and I would suggest things, I would write things. We'd talk about how we get from one thing to another. I did a lot more on talkback than I would, and then I would I'd figure out who worked well with each other on the panel, what people's particular strengths were, and I talked to all of them, and I said, so what have you seen this weekend? What do you want to talk about? Blah blah blah, and we would, increasingly, we would converse more about what would go into the show rather than just 3 people turning up and basically winging it and making a success of that by by accident. And that's when, I felt far more of an ownership, not sole ownership by any means, but kind of far more involved and far more integral to what we were doing. And that's been an enormous part of my week. James and I would talk all the time there, and I would talk to the other guests and the other people we'd have on, and kind of in the later year, when we had, I mentioned them again, Rafa and Horncastle, and who else? We'd have John Ashdown and other guys on at the Guardian. These guys become very good mates with them. So we would talk, and I'd get a good idea of their character and their personalities, and we'd build in elements of that to the show. And the longer you work with them, and the more you know what their voice, sort of their tone of voice and their tone of analysis, but also their humour. You do running gags and things. You recall moments that they talked about last time. That's something you can only do when you work on a show with the same people for a long time. And when it came to international tournaments and the like, when we're doing shows every night for 20 odd nights, that's the real fun. That's when you kind of get a story and a narrative going throughout the shows. And we started bringing a lot more music to the show and sort of just having a lot more fun. You can
hear that, I think.
Yeah. And we really sort of felt that we were kind of doing our own thing away from the rest of the paper, and just really loving it. And we started doing live shows as well, which is great. And I'd have to say, I'm going to bring in Ian at this point, Ian McIntosh.
The Mac Daddy.
I'm not going to call him that. But Ian, I'd always enjoyed reading Ian's stuff. And I got him on to be, I think it was when Shakhtar Donetsk were playing Borussia Dortmund in possibly a quarterfinal, and the other one was like Real Madrid versus Juventus. Ian could always be relied upon to cover the games that no one else would.
Yeah.
And he sort of carved out that niche for himself. And I got him on to do that, but also to, just give his whimsical take on football. And again, he and I became very good mates from that, and he's fantastic on air. And sort of from that first episode, he then became he was on every Monday throughout the season. And he also went to games as well. So that was very, that was a big advantage for him over a lot of the other guys who would just watch him on telly. But yeah, Ian got involved with the show, and that that also helped kind of that made the show a lot funnier as well, I think. And we could do things once Ian was there that we couldn't do with other panelists. And then and again Philippe we'd bring in, and we could talk about his musical background. We could talk about the fact that he was the voice of, I think his phrase was brace. He used to say that on the EasyJet flights. He's also the voice of the monkey in Aladdin in the French dub,
really?
The French version. Yeah,
wow.
We've got some very fascinating people with whom we had a lot of fun. But and I was saying we started doing live shows as well, and sort of knowing these guys' personalities and their confidence, and the more that they'd done the show, and the more that they sort of interacted with everyone, the different personalities interacted, we could do a really excellent sort of live version of that. I mean, geez, we played the London Palladium twice. We had 1,500, 2,000 people there, which was phenomenal. And that was a very proud moment to do that. We played in Norway. We played, we've done Liverpool, everywhere. And it was really great. And I could have sort of local people for the local shows. So they got like a nice kind of a local bit of buzz and brought their families and stuff. It was brilliant.
Who did you have in Norway?
We didn't have anyone Norwegian there. Although, no, we had Ian, who was he was a bit of a local star in Norway.
Is he?
He used to be flown over by, I can't remember the name of the TV channel, but he used to do their transfer deadline day coverage.
I did not know. That did not come up in our podcast. I wish it had.
No, it's transfer. It's Norwegian transfer superstar.
Wow.
I should say he's talking about the Premier League deadline day rather than Norwegian
that
transfers.
Would be exceptionally impressive if it was.
Yeah. But let me think. It was Ian, it was Barry, of course, who was always kind of the star of these live shows, and James Horncastle. And I remember it's James Horncastle because he and I ate some very bad, I think, beetroot carpaccio or raw beetroot or something beforehand, and yeah. Oh
dear.
I found a more secluded bathroom area than he did. He was sort of in the green room bathroom, which was neither of us were very well. But that was an amazing experience for so many reasons. Yeah.
Okay, so you were at The Guardian for 11 years. You're no longer at The Guardian, of course. What happened, Ben?
Well, sort of, I'd been there a long time. That is fair to say, and I had a young family, and I was trying to kind of better myself and look for. I wanted to feel that my career was going somewhere, and unfortunately, working at a newspaper and being one of only sort of 6 audio people. There's very limited opportunity for me to sort of progress career-wise and, financially as well. And, I felt like I'm part of this huge show, which is consistently one of the biggest shows in terms of audience numbers, in terms of reputation. We've just sold out the Palladium twice. We're doing all these tours. And yet, I'm still on the same sort of salary that I was on 6 years ago. And there's no career path. I can either be producer of this show or nothing. And I didn't want, it's not like I wanted to do another show or anything, but I wanted to do other things. I did a lot of freelance work on the side at my time at The Guardian. I basically had, I sort of had the security of a staff job with the lifestyle of a freelancer. But I did a lot of stuff. I worked with a couple of comedians and a couple of brands doing their shows. I can say all this now, statute of limitations and all of this. I was asked to write a book, which is still available. It's called Podcast Master, not my title. I thought you were just glancing there at your bookshelves there, Jed. So yes, I got a copy of it.
It's
no,
fantastic.
you don't.
It's an e-book, I believe.
It is an ebook, though I do have hardcover issues.
Do you really?
Yeah.
How does it? That's very exciting. I didn't read about that anywhere. I only read that it was an ebook, so that was hence my surprise.
I basically went to I didn't self-publish. I sort of went to I got them printed up,
right?
As like in the every 100. Like 100, 200 copies at a time.
Yeah.
Because I sometimes there's another thing. I did talks and sort of what the Guardian would loosely call masterclasses, but I held like seminars, and I had a lot of experience, and I was quite a lot I could share, and in terms of techniques, and I taught to university students as well, and I was the producer Ben thing was kind of known in a funny way, but people sort of knew who I was, and sort of within the industry they also knew who I was. So yeah, I was sort of looking to make the most of that and to better myself, and it became clearer and clearer that I couldn't do this at the Guardian. They've constantly been under financial constraints, and there's very sad news as we record this of 180 more job cuts there, and I had to sort of make the decision of, do I stay here and essentially do something I'm quite comfortable with, and but I'm basically treading water, and I can't take things much further, because the show is sort of a success in spite of the Guardian rather than because of. I'm very grateful for all the opportunity they gave us there, but their attention was always audio was the big thing for a while. Then they went to video, and that was exciting, and then they developed the website, and we just sort of carried on being successful doing our thing, but sort of as like the fun, slightly awkward stepchild, and. So I had been thinking of leaving for a while, and I talked about it with James about what to do. And James was just on a freelance contract with things, and he was out of contract generally at the end of the season. And Ian had often posited this thing. Why don't we kind of do something together? Why don't we set up this thing? We'll take the show, and we'll sell audio books, and we'll build a website, and we'll do all of this stuff. And we thought, we just sort of hummed and hawed over it, and James and I had become very close to signing with another company. This is in the summer of 2017. Got very close, sort of like contracts ready to be signed and all of this, and then that fell through because they said, sort of at the last minute, just when we were about to sign things, and having spoke to them at great length about what we needed, what we were going to do, they said, I don't think we can do this in time for the start of the season, but we could do it for Christmas. So why don't we leave it till then? And we thought, no, because you need to launch a football show at the start of the season. Yeah. And also, not many people know we were going to really help this brand sort of go not mainstream, but we were much more visible than they were, but they had much more resource and and clout than we did, but yeah, that fell through. And I called Ian, who I had talked about doing some setting up a business with for on many occasions, and he said, well, why don't we sort of get the band back together again? And then we had, for more on this, listen to Ian's interview, but we had sort of very frantic discussions between me, James, and him over this summer. And lo and behold, it eventually came to pass that Muddy Knees Media was set up. Ian had some financial backing, put in some of his life savings, and as the story goes, as a journalist, that's not very much. That's how he tells the story, which I've heard so many times, the origin story. But and then and James was in, and away we go. The actual announcement of it was fairly peculiar, because I was the only one on staff at the Guardian, so I was the only one who needed to resign from a job, or was in that kind of position. I think Ian had asked Daniel Story, who was at Football 365 at the time, to publish a story on whatever the Monday was at lunchtime, so that I could I could do whatever I needed to do that Monday morning.
Jesus.
It was school holiday. It was holidays for my kids. I was off. I was taking my kids to school football camp that morning, and the Sunday before I think James was on holiday. He'd had a last minute change of heart, and then we thought, okay, we're not going to do it. And then I had another talk to him, and then we all finally agreed. We were in place. And yeah, this story was going to launch at lunchtime, and unbeknownst to me, as I took my kids to football camp, and my phone started going mental, it launched at like 8 or 9 a.m. saying James Richardson leaves Football Weekly to set up Totally Football Show or something. And I got a message from Nick Miller, who now works with us, saying, "You sly dog, Ben Green." I got a text from Mikkel Jongsma, who was our sort of Dutch football correspondent, saying, "Congratulations, well done, bud," and like lots of other nice messages. And I thought, oh, how do they know? And then I got loads of calls from The Guardian saying, "We've seen this article, what's going on?" And this was because I hadn't resigned at the time, and it said in this article, Ben Green, producer Ben, has joined him and has also resigned. But, having been in the job for 11 years and I hadn't had a staff position anywhere before, I didn't actually know how to resign.
Right.
So
how do you resign? Send an email and tell them?
Well, I ignored all the calls from The Guardian, and then I sent an email to someone in HR who I'd been speaking to previously, actually, about leaving and sort of taking voluntary redundancy. So I sort of had an in there, and I emailed her and said, "I've considered my this. Please consider this my letter of resignation or whatever." Blah blah blah. And because I was on holiday, I said, I've got a month's notice, and I'll be back in 2 weeks or something to see it out. Anyway, very typical for The Guardian. I got an out of office reply. And then shortly after that, I got a message from someone else in the HR team saying, first of all, we've received your resignation. Thank you very much. And then like 10 minutes after that, it has come to light that there's an article linked to that says you've done blah, blah, blah. You are now, we believe this to be breach of contract. You're placed on gardening leave. You are not allowed back in the office, and you will hear further stuff. So that got exciting. And then, that was kind of going on in the background. I'd already spoken to an employment lawyer about my contract, so I was kind of prepared for that. But still, when it happens, it's not very nice.
Yeah.
And it was, having been there for 11 years, and I got some good pals there. I mean, most of whom had left by this time, actually. It ended in a very sour way. That the legal thing sort of resolved itself fairly quickly, actually. And my initial 8-game ban was reduced to 1 appeal. But yeah, that first Totally Football show, when we set up, I wasn't allowed to be anywhere near, and I was in Cornwall, actually. I was on a planned family holiday, which I sort of was really humming and hawing over to go on because we just set up Muddy Knees. But I couldn't be near. And so I went and we did the show, and it was really very excellent. And I think I wasn't back for the second one, but I was sort of in the background for the second one. And then I did the third one, and away we go. And
what was it like to miss the first one? That would have felt like quite a momentous occasion, presumably, given the route to getting there.
Yeah, it was.
Were you glued to your phone on holiday, sort of waiting to hear information about it?
I was in somewhere in Cornwall which didn't have Wi-Fi or a good signal, so that was
good and bad. Yeah,
so that was good. So sort of when I moved to a point, I'd get a load of messages about James, Ian, and I had a chat group, and I could see what was going on. And I know that Ian was really nervous about it, but we had Kelly Cates, we had Jules on it as well, and I think that's the three. We might have had Michael Cox on that first one, or he might have been on the second one. But anyway, we had a really good lineup, and having Kelly was amazing. And I was sort of in the background before I went away, and I was just having my legal issues, sort of. So they talked about who was going to be on the show, and Kelly was amazing. She was a brand new voice. Jules hadn't been on really very much on Football Weekly, but we wanted to start with a bang, with cool music, and just a different vibe, which was positive, passionate, and loads of expertise. And the show, we did a little launch coming soon trailer with the final countdown by Europe, which was cool, and just we really wanted to play up we're different. We're not just Football Weekly under a different name. So that meant bringing a lot of new voices, and just doing different things, and having, if you listen to our two shows now, and it took us like a good year to find our voice. It took that we had that World Cup in Russia after that first season. That was really when we sort of discovered ourselves. Loads of comms, loads of fun musical bits, occasional bits we did skits and like recreations of great goals with some, effects on people's voices. And just really setting ourselves apart at a time when, the Guardian were getting more and more sort of, they were sort of like three grumpy men. Which is fine. That's what, and I should say, that's kind of what it was. There was a lot of that towards the end of my time on Football Weekly there. You'd have Barry, you'd have Wilson and Barney, who are all brilliant writers, very good broadcasters as well, but they come from, their perspective is often, football. God, I've seen enough of that. They're just a bit tired and grumpy about it. And from an outsider perspective, that kind of stuck with me, because I thought, people, and I got this from going to the live shows, or just people getting in touch or wanting work experience on the show, saying, "Oh, you must have the best job in the world, you guys, you're paid to watch football, and you talk about football for a living and all this." And so to then sort of say, the Wi-Fi is really shit at all the grounds, and God, what a journey this was. And true, that is the experience of covering football, but we wanted to have a much more positive vibe on air about it.
Right.
So you won't hear any of our people on air complaining about, God, football's rubbish.
Right, yeah.
Isn't it? It's been quite difficult with VAR.
Sure. I can imagine. Yeah.
But we've always been positive.
Well, let's put it this way though, because I mean, when you left to form Muddy Knees, obviously a crew of very, very talented people. I'm sure that you felt confident in that the shows that you were going to create would be a success in terms of their structure and their sound, and you could be confident about the output and the quality in that sense. But really, it's a numbers game, right? And you are waiting to find out how many people are going to download that first episode. As far as I'm aware, it did exceptionally well, as you did in the first couple of months generally. How much of a relief or a surprise, or were you confident about that? Because when I spoke to Ian about it, I think it felt very much like a relief. It felt like not necessarily, I think vindication is the wrong word, but just like a relief that, like, going through what you guys went through to form this wasn't wasted. It wasn't the wrong thing to do.
Absolutely. I mean, we put in so much to it, and we'd all taken an enormous risk for doing it. And Ian was still working as a football writer at this time. He wasn't taking any money from the company. I think I was the only salaried employee. But when we started, we didn't have a studio where we could record regularly. We didn't have any office space. We didn't have anything at all that you would need to make a show, and we needed to do 2 a week. And Ian's very kindly said that he sort of looked after the business side of stuff far more, and he said he'd never had to worry about the quality of the show because James and I were kind of looking after that. And that's that's lovely to hear. But similarly, I never doubted that we could do it as a proposition. But like you say, as a business, that was far more stressful. We had probably about 3 months worth of money to do the shows, and we'd called in favors with some people that we'd worked with before in terms of sort of sponsorships and campaigns and stuff. So we had a bit of money from that. Audio Boom made us a really amazing pitch. I spoke to some people there, and they really wanted us to be involved with them, and so they kind of got on board. And they're aside from just money and helping us get some ads involved, they really wanted to help us grow, and very quickly, by using their existing football partners and stuff. So that was really good. But yeah, we were playing. We really had to sprint out of the blocks, and we had someone doing our sales for us, and obviously we targeted the likes of a betting partner because they would pay a premium for a football audience. They were the most likely people to do it and take a punt on us, because we came with an audience and a subscriber base of 0 when we started. We needed people to take a real punt, and commercial deals don't get done quickly. So we had, like I said, 3 months, a ticking clock for 3 months, and we needed to get something done quickly. The bookies were the most likely source of that, but even still, getting a deal done within 3 months is still pretty. That's still pretty swift. So yeah, it was incredibly nerve-wracking, and the last thing we wanted, particularly because there was some bad feeling from the Guardian lot, as well there should be. Tail between our legs and having to, it wouldn't be a case of us having to go back there, but just you did this and you failed.
Yeah,
that was no one wanted any part of that.
Yeah. So how did it feel when you saw the numbers for the first episode then, the download numbers?
Yeah, well, our projections were always sort of, I knew what the Guardian audience was, obviously, and we thought we could get close to that by the end of the first year. But we anticipated 20,000 for the first episode, and then add another 1,000 on for each of the other 80 episodes, and we'd be 100,000 by the end of the season. And that's kind of where we wanted to be. That was down on what the Guardian had, but they had the Guardian behind them and a massive track record and the brand name. We were starting from scratch, but we had Jimbo and we had a good show. But yeah, we launched and we sort of blew that first number out within like an hour, 2 hours or something. So that was good. And then we thought, shit, we got something here, we think. And then, Paddy Power came through with the deal, which was fantastic. Had some other commercial partners on board. But, another massive help for us was we ended up at Jazz FM. Our guy who was doing our sales at the time, a guy called David Salem, who was a pal. He was a dad at my kid's school as well, but also he's a radio sales exec from back in the day. And I did some projects with him and some work with him on some pods that he started up. So he was very excited to be on board with us to start with. But he used to be like the commercial director for Jazz FM back in the day, and kept like he kind of had like one studio credit a week with them, and he rented out their boardroom for a couple of hours a week, so he used them as office space and stuff. So getting David meant that we had the opportunity. We kind of got into Jazz FM, and we sorted out a deal with them for the studio and basically we never left after that. Most of their stuff was pre-recorded anyway, or sort of outside of the breakfast show and drive time. So the time we needed the studio was great. They, and we paid them for all this, but they configured the studio so that I could have a control room. They had two big studios and then sort of one voiceover booth in the middle, but they sort of paired up the studio so that I could sit in there and be, do my thing, because if I don't have talkback, I've never felt like I could do my job properly.
Right.
And sort of direct traffic, and give bad stats and worse jokes and things. But, they were incredibly generous to do that. And then, they had a little box room, and because I was initially editing in a corridor, basically. And they said to me and Ian, we've got this little room. If we cleared that out, would you be interested in having the desk space? And we said, absolutely. And, the two of us set up shop in a room which was far too small for both of us. It was unbelievably hot because it had like the hot water pipe for the entire building running through it. We got a hideous green sofa for it and a big telly to put in there. We took Jazz FM's old Stella Artois fridge, which basically from a skip.
Yeah. And
that became our green room office stroke, that became the nerve centre for Muddy Knees HQ.
The greasy room.
For a while. Yeah, and we stayed there for, we had about 2 years. Yeah, we had 2 years at Jazz, and they were incredibly, incredibly cool people, really lovely people. And one of sort of their CEO, or I forget what his role was, but he became a non-exec director of Muddy Knees, like incredibly well-connected radio guy. And, whilst I kind of looked after the content side, so particularly the football things, and we had James presenting all of that, Ian was like an absolute force of nature, and sort of, from never having worked in the radio industry or the audio industry, he very quickly became very connected with lots of people and made us appear much bigger and more successful than we were. And Ian's, he's like a home county's village vicar, sort of lovely geniality, coupled with that experience of being the sort of the Essex bin bag salesman, and he's grafted. I mean, Ian grafts like no one else I've ever met. But Ian can do anything. He can do commercial deals. He can deal with talent. He can set people's mind at ease. He can write a presentation, and he has like 8 not always good ideas a day, and then just sort of moves on to the next one. And he doesn't always he would come up with an idea, and then often I would have to see it through, or as our team grew, other people would. But yeah, he was phenomenal, and the amount that he took on in terms of the business side and getting all of that done was amazing. And we've had such a incredible. You wanted to talk about a journey at the start of this. We had an amazing journey together. Our 3 years of Muddy Knees were just incredible. We put our absolute heart and souls into it, and it was great fun and very stressful at the same time. But there's no one I would have rather have done it more with than Ian.
Well, you've sold it to the Americans now. What's happened there, and what are you doing? I mean, you're now a colleague of mine, technically.
Yes, we now have the same sugar daddy.
We now have the same sugar daddy, the same job title. Seems insane to me. What are you? I mean, Ian gave us the story of how that company decided to make the decision. So I think in your case, let's talk about what your role is with The Athletic now, and are you excited to be here?
Of course, I'm excited to be here, Joe.
Sure.
And to work with talent such as yourself,
right here.
And it's not just me and Ian and our various other. We had about 5. We've got about 5 members of staff now, sort of full time and part time. But we've got, we're part of a much bigger thing now, and I mean certainly we've joined at an odd time in terms of sports and all of that. And so, we've had to finish off the season, and, there's no sort of break. There's not a great, there hasn't been an opportunity to integrate massively with what the Athletic are currently doing. We're kind of seeing out our own things at the moment, and that integration will come further down the line. But I'm in charge of all the Muddy Knees shows, so that's all the football stuff, and we also have some very successful history shows with the BBC, Home School History, You're Dead to Me. We've got some commercial, sort of branded content stuff that's going on, From the Horse's Mouth, Paddy Power's horse racing show. We're doing a series for Procter and Gamble at the moment. But yeah, we've got a lot of stuff on. So, I should preface all of this saying that I haven't produced totally since January. I'd always wanted to be. I just kind of wanted the time to be able to hear everything we were putting out, and to kind of get away from doing, setting up a show that's guest booking and research and all of this, and sort of having to know everything about football and sort of and then editing for however many hours afterwards. It wasn't a chore by any means. I absolutely adore editing, and there is nothing quite like having your headphones on and forgetting all your troubles and just focusing on waveforms and making order out of chaos a lot of the time, and making adding in sound effects or songs or commentary, and just making that show that you've just done kind of what you intended it to be, but no one else in the room, probably apart from James, sort of knew how it would sound afterwards.
Do you know what? I kind of miss it, because I've just handed over editing responsibilities to our new producer Adonis, who's not here right now. Yeah. But as you describe there, headphones on, staring at the screen, oh, it is lovely, isn't it? When it all comes together, the smallest thing that, as you say, no one else will notice is very, very important to me.
No, absolutely. And I just, but we had so many shows, and I was, I've kind of taken more and more, well, I've always had to sort of do things as part of startup. For the first year or so, I had to handle the invoices for everyone and do loads of sort of admin shit that I'm not very good at, and that's very time consuming, but one, needs to do, because we didn't have an HR department or a business manager or this, that, and the other. And, we didn't have an art team. So often I would just have to wing it with Photoshop or Preview more likely, because I have very basic skills. And, Ian and I did all sorts of stuff that we are certainly not trained for or have experience of, but we just sort of had to do between ourselves, because that's what you do at a startup. But fundamentally, my role was sort of ensuring that all of our shows sounded good, and I couldn't do that while spending so much time on making Total Football. So we've had Charlie Jones has been making the show since January, and he's phenomenally talented, and he's really very creative as well. Gets on brilliantly with James, which is there have been people who've come and gone who haven't, who've covered for me or done other projects with James, and he's very demanding in a very particular way. He's not he's not difficult per se, but he really needs to kind of trust you and get you, and he and Charlie get on fantastically, and Charlie's very much a step up from me. So that's why the show's sounding so good.
Are you saying that James Richardson's a bit like a cautious dog, with a history of
cautious
harm,
dog,
has to trust you? You know what I'm saying?
Yes, before he urinates on.
I've said this to a cat person, haven't I? This is the problem.
You have, yes. I'm sorry. No, dogs I don't get, but cats I do, because a dog will love any old idiot, but
not true.
For a cat, it takes a particular type of relationship.
This is the kind of often the cliched misconception of cats and dogs. Dogs won't just love anyone; they'll love you if you treat them well. Cats will never love you because they don't need you, and that's the way that I look at it. But hey, I've got nicotine withdrawal, and I have to go and smoke now. So that's how we're going to end today's episode. But thanks, Ben, for coming on. Executive producer Ben. We look forward to hearing all of Muddy Knee's projects, which are available on the internet, aren't they?
And ad-free on The Athletic.
Do you know what? I never say that, actually. I feel like we should say... I've been meaning to say for a while, if you're listening to this podcast, one of the benefits of being an Athletic subscriber is that you can listen to... I mean, we don't actually have any adverts right now, except for ones about The Athletic. If you hate those ones, become a subscriber, you won't hear them. But also, they might stay in, actually, if you're listening to On The Athletic. I think you'd be a fool not to do cross-promotion for other things. But the best thing about it is that we get to link the relevant pieces that we're talking about. So when you listen on the app, you can just click straight through to whatever piece that we're talking about.
Beautiful.
That's really good. I like that.
That's synergy. And you know what? You wouldn't have had that just doing Tifo by yourself, and certainly we didn't have that when we were by ourselves. So isn't that nice?
That was the main reason we decided to come.
And do you know who the main beneficiary of that is?
The listener.
The listener, the viewer, the reader.
The multimedia subscriber, the user, that's right.
Yeah, it's a win-win for all.
It's a win-win. It's a win-win for content, I think is what you're saying.
I think it's all about the content, Joe.
Well, hey, producer Ben, thanks so much for coming, and Ben Green, and we'll chat to you again in the future, hopefully.
Joe, it's been an absolute pleasure.